Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, staying happy, healthy, and hydrated, and all that good stuff. If I sound different in this video, it's because I'm dealing with a little bit of a cold, so forgive me for that. In this video, I have some particularly strange and weird encounters and just weird things happening. So, if that sounds like something you like, definitely pull up a stump with me and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. This happened a few years ago in the Virginia mountains. I was 22 years old at the time. I was an airman and I was home for my second deployment. I decided to go into the woods to my cousin's property to camp and screw around with my Wasser 10. My cousin is my dad's age, like in his 60s, and this is important later. So I hike a mile in and I set up camp. All is going according to plan. There's a good fire, good vibes on local bluegrass radio stations, and I'm just chilling listening to the music. And the only thing that was on my gun was a mag light that I had put on it. And I heard howling that got closer, so I turned on my light to see a pack of coyotes. I yell at them, and then they leave. The cold is starting to set in. I should have checked the weather before I left, but I forgot to, and now it's snowing and freezing rain. So I decide to turn in and just try to get some sleep. I get woken up at 2 a.m. to the sound of my cousin's voice yelling, "Hey," and then my name. I yell back, "Yeah, Bill? What are you doing out here?" I instantly realize that it's strange that my 60-plus-year-old cousin is out here in a freezing rainstorm. I clutch my gun in my hands and I sit up. After the adrenaline wears off, I end up getting really drowsy and I pass out. The next morning, though, I wake up with the gun still in my hands and freezing. I dress and I hike down the mountain. I ask my cousin Bill if he was up in the woods last night, thinking that he was maybe checking in on me to see how I was doing. He says no, that he had taken his son to physical therapy and he went to bed early at like 8 p.m. I had a weird look on my face. I think he recognized it because he stopped and said, "Those woods can do some weird things to you. There's some weird things out there." I know that he has experienced something similar there as well. This comes up now as I learn that nearby is an ancient ritual site of some unknown tribe. I'm returning to solo camp again there soon, and we'll see if anything happens. So I live in High River, Alberta. The mountains are only an hour or so drive away. So me and some friends decide to go camping out in Kananaskis near Canmore. Since they're like family, I'll call one Iron Bro, and then one Tracker Sis, Stoner Sis. So Iron Bro is a metal worker, if you didn't get the vibe. He's a big guy too, like close to 6'5", and easily the strongest of us. He always carries a buck knife that he made himself. Tracker Sis was raised in the mountains. She knows every animal and their habitat, down to a T. She can somehow find even the smallest trace of animals and can track them like a damn expert. Stoner Sis is a great cook. I call her Stoner Sis as a joke because she's not actually a stoner. She has a medical license for her glaucoma. And as for me, I'm just some regular Métis guy. It's late September, so the leaves are just starting to change. The cold weather hasn't quite set in yet, so we shouldn't be too cold. We take our truck out past Longview, heading toward the Kananaskis country. There's lots of trails right off the highway where you can hike. You're allowed to camp anywhere there that we'd like to. We end up choosing a spot across the bank from the Highwood River. About 12 or so kilometers away is Canmore. Despite the proximity, it's actually super quiet out there. The tree line is extremely thick and continues like that all the way up the mountainside. So, we park our truck and grab all of our gear. Iron Bro and I carry the tents. Tracker Sis has our map and her hunting rifle, in case we run into any weird wild animals. Grizzly bears are especially common this time of year. Stoner Sis has all the food and our clothes. We trek for about, I want to say 3 hours or so, and find a nice cliff face that overlooks the highway below. We can easily see our truck from there. It's this super nice area that's sheltered from the winds blowing through the peaks. Looking around our chosen base, we find some trees that have been bent. They look like large poplars, and they look like they've been leaning against each other. There's 5 or 6 all in a bunch. After a few minutes, Iron Bro asks me why I'm so intensive on looking at that set of trees. He and Stoner Sis are already setting up the tents. I tell him about the weird way that all the trees are bent. He tells me that it's probably just snowfall from the last year, and he seemed right. I didn't think too much else about it. But Tracker Sis wasn't convinced. She tells us that she's seen stuff like this north of Red Deer and over near Burnaby in BC. The locals say it's an odd phenomenon. The local First Nations say it's from the Sasquatch. Stoner Sis laughs. Sasquatch? Get real. And then she laughs. Tracker Sis just shakes her head. She might not believe, but she respects the legends enough that she listens to the First Nations elders. Personally, I remember my grandfather talking about them. He said they were peaceful, but that you should avoid their territory if you can. We continue setting up camp. By the time we're done, it's close to dark. We gather around our bonfire that we made, and we enjoy a nice quiet dinner. And there's lots of jokes and lots of fun. Stoner Sis offers some weed, but none of us take any. The Tracker Sis wants us to stay sharp in case there's bears that come around. We tie up the rest of our food up high in a tree, about 12 feet off the ground in a nearby maple. The bears won't be able to reach it up there. After that, we turn in for the night. The next day, I get woken up by Tracker Sis. She says, "Man, wake up. Something tried to grab the food." I hurry out as Iron Bro wakes up as well as Stoner Sis. Sure enough, the tree with the food has some newly broken branches. It's what looks like claw marks are higher up the tree. Luckily, our bag of food is undisturbed. Iron Bro says maybe it's a black bear. Tracker Sis agrees and says that we should try and tie it up higher tonight. Stoner Sis and myself go out to get some water. There's a stream not far from our clearing. We have all the gear needed to purify our water. Beaverage is quite common here. We walk up to the stream and start filling our larger jug that we brought with us. And as we do, I notice the branches in the trees. They're all broken in the same direction. I stand up to take a closer look. All the branches are about 10 feet off the ground. They all point in the same direction, away from our campsite. I remember my grandfather's warning. If you see branches broken together, the Sasquatch has marked its path. Stay the way it points. All else is their territory. We return to the camp, and I tell the others about the branches. Iron Bro is confused but not worried. He says they're just broken sticks, man. But Tracker Sis is unconvinced. I've seen branches like that. They mean something bad. I confirm her statement and tell them what my grandfather told me. Iron Bro is still skeptical. Stoner Sis finally speaks up. She says, "When we got the water, did you feel weird?" "Weird how?" I say. "Like somebody was watching us." I think back on it. Looking at the branches, I remember the hair on my neck standing up. I remember the birds stopped singing. The birds only stopped for a predator. It couldn't be us. They continued as we were there. Something else must have come. As I say this, I get a shiver. Something was there, Stoner Sis says again. Tracker Sis and I are now thoroughly unnerved. Iron Bro is still doubtful, but he looks more than a little nervous now. We decide to stay near the camp for the night. Darkness falls again, and we're around another fire. We're a little more at ease now, but as we're talking, we hear a sound off in the distance. It sounds like somebody is knocking on wood. It's echoing through the mountains, so we can't get a good idea of direction. It knocks 3 times before pausing. After a minute, the knocking happens again. Iron Bro jokes we should knock back. Tracker Sis shakes her head adamantly, says it's a very bad idea. I already stood up and grabbed a large stick that was in our woodpile. I approached the tree with the food and started knocking in return. Like the first noise, I knock 3 times in return, and then I wait. 3 knocks happen again. Iron Bro laughs. Stoner Sis has a small smile as well. I knock again. The knocks return, but this time, they're joined by a scream. I've heard lots of animals before. This was entirely unfamiliar. Elk, wolves, owls, bears, humans. This sounded like none of them. This was primal, bestial. It echoed from where the knocks came from. Tracker Sis is now very scared. She says I recognize that sound. I ask her what it is. She just stands slowly. That was a Sasquatch. She says she heard these calls out in BC. None of us quite know what to say. Then we hear the call again. It sounds more agitated, like it's expecting an answer. I say, should I call back? And she says, no, don't. Very seriously. It could be bad. Very bad. Then we hear another call. This one is close. 50 feet behind us in the bush, we hear it. It's practically bellowing and shakes right through us. Iron Bro is now incredibly scared, holding Stoner Sis protectively. Stoner Sis is halfway through her 3rd joint and is unable to comprehend anything but her own fear. Tracker Sis grabs her rifle reflexively. I back away toward them, clutching my big stick. We hear the call through the mountains again. The thing is closer and bellows back. It's gotten closer still. We can hear it coming through the underbrush. The leaves are crunching under its feet gently. Then we can smell it, that deep forest musk. Think like a wet dog meets pure testosterone mixed with a skunk. None of us know what to do exactly. It sounds big, and all we have is a single gun, a buck knife, a hand axe, and my stick. Whatever this is, it probably wouldn't feel any of that. The movement stops, and we're holding our breath. It's now only 10 feet away, just outside the light of our fire, just inside the bush. For a moment of silence, then the calling in the distance starts again. This one is longer, more purposeful, like it was summoning something. The thing across from us bellows back again, but now it's stamping the ground. It pounds the ground with its feet and hands before shaking the trees. We wait for the worst, then it starts to walk away. We wait and listen to see if it comes back. After about 20 minutes, we hastily retreat inside of our tents. Morning couldn't come fast enough. None of us slept. None of us dared to. The next morning, I'm up first. I go and check out our campsite. The food is still undisturbed, but the tree it was in was thoroughly shaken. This was a large maple. The trunk had to be 2 feet in diameter. The roots looked like they were being pulled out. They were exposed and the earth was thoroughly beaten. Tracker Sis and Iron Bro joined me soon after. Stoner Sis won't leave her tent. She's too scared. I don't blame her, to be honest. We find no traces of anything else other than many more broken branches and a tuft of hair. We seal that away before returning to our campsite. We decide it's no longer safe to stay here. We pack up faster than I could have imagined we would have, and we set back out down the trail. The whole time, we were definitely being watched, not just by one thing, but by multiple. I scan the tree line to see if I can spot anything, but I can never see anything. But the birds are quiet. Once we reach our vehicle, we dive inside and drive on into Canmore. We spend the rest of our trip out there in a local motel. Anyone who asks us why we left early just gets told that we encountered a grizzly bear. They wouldn't believe us otherwise. We headed back to High River not long after. Tracker Sis is now cautious about going into the mountains again. Iron Bro and Stoner Sis since have started dating, and they move in together. Now, their wedding's actually in a few months. I'm speaking in retrospect. Both now strongly believe in Sasquatch. When I got in, I called my grandfather, and I left a message for him about what happened. He called me back immediately and sounded more scared than I could ever imagine. He says that we were lucky that there was one that close and that we weren't hurt or killed. He advises us that we camp in a larger group next time, or just not in that area, or at least bring something else to defend ourselves. We ended up sending the hair away that we found, but we haven't heard the results. All of us believe in Sasquatch now. We all kind of want to go back though, despite how much it all scared us. It would be cool to see one, you know. Sasquatches though. Friggin' Sasquatches. It started out 5 buddies going fishing. We were headed to Knott Creek Reservoir, basically a pond on the northern border of Nevada and Oregon. This is near the Sheldon Antelope Range. Knott Creek was a favorite fishing hole. We had been there many times. There are 2 routes to get there, to this fishing favorite. The normal route for my group is the Alda Creek route. The other is through the Black Rock Desert. And yes, that is now the place that they hold Burning Man. This story took place long before they started lighting the desert on fire. Our normal path took us through Denio, Nevada, a place I would not expect many to have heard of. This path had a central camping spot that allowed easier access to 3 fishing holes. The Black Rock route went straight through Knott Creek. We were only going for 2 days, so straight to Knott Creek was the plan. All 5 of us had known each other since we were kids. We went to school together, grew up with each other. We knew each other very well. So, playing jokes and messing around was the standard. It did have limits and rules, not written or even spoken, but known to each of us. There was a line that we never crossed. We rolled in midday on a Friday. We were all sure to get off work early. The plan was to make the signing shack before dark, sign in, and make dinner. The signing shack was just an old line shack, a building set in the middle of the desert to get in and out of the weather if needed. Everyone stopped at the signing shack and carved names and dates into the walls and supports, letting others know that, hey, we were here again. We would be riding in my 81 CJ7. I love that old Jeep. With my off-road box trailer and Rob's 74 Toyota Land Cruiser and his off-road box trailer. 3 guys in the Toyota, 2 guys and 2 Labradors in the Jeep. We got out into the desert and laid the foot to the floor, just tearing across the desert. We wanted to get to the shack sign and then cook dinner. As we left Gerlach, it was always agreed that you know your way because you're not going to be able to see another rig until you're stopped. You knew from the dust cloud if the other rigs were out there, but that was all you could see until you were stopped. Communicating was done on the CB radios. It was funny to do your best trucker CB jargon impersonation, like Smokey and the Bandit. My handle was the Nine-Toed Idiot, having lost a toe in a motocross race a few years ago. Gary was Heaving Herbert. I'll let you guess why. We had fun going back and forth, making jokes, just being young. This trip was very different. No one was joking or having fun at all. I can't say why exactly, but the mood was unusually serious. So I was in the lead, and the Toyota was a few miles back, and everything was going as planned so far. At what I'd call about halfway or so to the shack, I asked my co-pilot, Mike, to look for our buddy's dust clouds. This is where things started turning strange. Mike said, "Man, I can't see them. Stop, Joe. The scary thing is, out there, if you get out of control, you roll around, and at 70 miles per hour you can die, or worse, possibly linger for days and then die. The desert can be very dangerous, and if you screw up, there aren't a lot of folks around to help." So I stopped. Both of us started scanning the horizon, hoping to see some movement. But there was no dust cloud. No anything. Just eerie silence. Mike keyed up on the radio. "Hey, breaker jerks, where are you? I'm hungry." This was met by silence. Mike tried a second time. "Gary? Rob? Are you out there?" More silence. Mike looked at me. "Damn, I'm worried, Joe." I nodded in agreement and turned the Jeep around and started back. We were as close as any brothers. Now, Mike and I, of course, were thinking that maybe we just lost the three of them. We drove back the way we came, then circled for a bit, and then back some more. Yet again, we found nothing. Now, I can track an idea, and Mike was more mountain than anyone I knew. The other three guys could hold their own also. Rob was just like me out in the wild, Gary as well. But the other Joe was the only one who wasn't pure mountain man, but he was learning. We drove all the way back to Gerlach, and nothing. We found the tracks left by the Jeep, but no Toyota tracks, however. We left Gerlach together, and had driven a couple miles before I took the lead and pulled ahead a mile or two. So there should have been side-by-side tracks until I took the lead, yet there was only one Jeep and one trailer. We went back into the desert, all the way to the shack, and found nothing. As time went on, we knew that we would be forced to stop. We're talking about one of the darkest places on Earth. Getting turned around out there at night is really easy. So we got to the shack again, and we stayed, and made some sandwiches by flashlight. Then we settled in for the night. In the morning, we made breakfast, and went in the shack. Their names were carved in the walls, and so were ours. Now that was really strange, because Mike and I didn't go until that morning. Things were getting really strange now. Mike and I had all the food in the big cooler in my trailer, and one of the dogs was Rob's dog, the other belonged to Mike. After we came out of the shack, we could see the tracks leading away. They were not ours, so the chase was on. After we got a couple miles out, everything disappeared. No tire tracks, no dust cloud, nothing. I looked at Mike and said, "They're going to pay for this." When we got to Knott Creek, it was empty. No one was there. So we started back toward the shack. 30 or 40 minutes back toward the shack, I stopped. Frustration was starting to set in. I looked at Mike and shrugged. We had two fat-wheeled motorcycles we always carried in each trailer. Our rigs were old and broke down a lot. So after we unloaded the bike, I told Mike that I would drop the trailer and the dogs. I set my dog pins. Those are stakes that dogs are trained to think of as like a kennel. I figured the dogs would watch over everything, and dropping the trailer would make driving easier. So I got everything dropped, and Mike said that he would get up on the closest ridge for a better view. Splitting up had me worried, so I moved as quickly as I could and then hurried to meet back up with Mike. When I got back to the meeting spot, he was thankfully there, so we continued back into the desert. We found nothing again. No dust, no Toyota, no friends, nothing. We searched until about midday. After that point, we knew it was time to get the sheriff. Also, we needed to call Mike's dad. He has a plane, and he can start flying over. So we head back to the lake to pick up our stuff. We decided Mike would ride the bike back, and we would unload the trailer and leave it. Then we would let one dog ride and let the other one have a run. We would make a lot better time that way. As we got close to the spot I left the dogs in the trailer, I suddenly hear the Toyota horn. There they are. Thank God. They were pissed too, and we didn't care. What the hell? The PG-13 version. They said, "What the hell happened to you two?" Rob screamed at me. "What the F do you mean, jackass?" He looks at me straight in the eye and says, "You never showed up at the shack last night." That was it. Mike gut-punched Rob at that point. "We spent the night at the shack," replies Mike. This goes back and forth for a while. That is until I asked, "Did you sign in for us?" I asked this to Gary. Well, Mike, Rob, and Joe and Gary were arguing who was there and whose fault everything was. He says no. You had already done Team 911, Joe A, Mike, Gary, Joe G, and Robbie. I shook my head and said, "No, I went in this AM." And I said Robbie, Joe G, and Gary, June 16th, 1993. And then I asked him another question. "What did you eat? We had all the food." Joe G says, "No, they had the big cooler." Then he tells us how they went all the way back to Gerlach and could not find us, nor our tracks. Most of the rest of the day was spent trying to figure it out. On the upside, we caught the biggest fish ever that weekend. On the trip back, we could only find one set of tracks at the shack, yet everything was carved into the walls. If all that wasn't strange enough, while we were untangling everything, the two of the best trained Labradors ever disappeared. We found the dogs at the bar in Gerlach. The bartender claimed that we left them to go search for our friends. None of us can explain what happened. I can't even begin. We speak of it rarely, and Gary is gone now, so we will never be able to compare all versions again. There's no way this happened, yet I was a part of it. We still fish that lake, but we never go up through Black Rock anymore. And I would like to thank Joe, or JS somewhere, for sending in that really strange story. What do you think happened that day in 1993? I hope I could do your story justice, and I especially say that since I'm recording with a cold this week, so I hope that doesn't take away from it. But yeah, thank you to Joe for sending that in. So, what'd you think of those encounters? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have a story or encounter of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send it to if you want to. I also have a PayPal and a Patreon down there as well, if that's something that you want to do, like donate to the channel. And with that, I think that I will see you in the next one. I thank you for pulling up a stump, and I thank you for watching. Have a good one.